Have you ever wondered how a small, landlocked country basically turns itself into a vital economic powerhouse right in the middle of Europe? Well, welcome to this explainer. We're going to unpack over 25 years of history, economics, and geopolitics to figure out exactly how Austria completely transformed itself, and honestly helped transform the entire European continent in the process.
Think about this phrase for a second, a Europe that protects. That was the actual and, kind of provocative motto when Austria took the presidency of the Council of the European Union back in 2018. And it perfectly sets our stage today. It really makes us ask a critical question. What exactly is Austria protecting? And how in the world does a nation balance that protective instinct with an absolute reliance on a borderless, open market?
So, to understand Austria's dynamic identity, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Entering the European Union. 2. Economic growth and expansion. 3. Labor, migration, and solidarity. 4. Balancing the EU budget. And 5. Protecting and expanding Europe.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, entering the European Union, where historical neutrality meets modern integration. Let's rewind the clock to January 1st, 1995. That is the exact day Austria officially entered the European Union, right alongside Finland and Sweden. Now, the Austrian Central Bank, the Österreichische Nationalbank, has meticulously tracked how joining the EU forced the country to rapidly adapt its foreign trade and monetary policies. Because before 1995, Austria was just part of the European Free Trade Association. But full EU accession, that meant unrestricted access to the single market. It was a massive shift that fundamentally rewrote their entire economic playbook. But here's the kicker. Austria brought something really unique to the table: permanent neutrality. This is an actual constitutional obligation for them to stay militarily non-aligned. And it's absolutely crucial, because Austria's traditional role as a neutral broker and bridge builder shaped its entire approach to European integration. It allowed them to act as this highly effective central hub connecting the East and the West. Which brings us to Section 2, economic growth and expansion. Let's look at how that geographic position turned into a major financial advantage. Okay, 0.8%. It might sound like a tiny fraction, right? But that actually represents the massive annual GDP growth dividend Austria enjoys strictly because of EU integration and single market participation. And you might be wondering, why did Austria see much larger welfare and GDP effects than Finland and Sweden, who joined at the exact same time? Well, it all comes down to strategic integration and a massive surge in intra-EU trade. Believe it or not, that now makes up over 70% of Austria's total trade volume. The thing is, Austrian businesses didn't just quietly participate in the EU. They actively became the primary economic bridge into Eastern Europe. Right after the fall of the Iron Curtain in 1989, Austrian banks expanded rapidly into Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. They fueled this dynamic loan growth in places like Czechia, Hungary, and Poland. And get this, when Romania and Bulgaria joined the EU, Austrian greenfield foreign direct investment in those nations surged by a staggering 180% in just the first 3 years. Austria was perfectly positioned to capitalize on this eastward expansion, completely revitalizing its own financial sector. But hey, an economy isn't just numbers and banks, right? That leads us to Section 3, labor, migration, and solidarity. Let's examine the internal, human impact of EU expansion on Austria's demographics. To really grasp this, we can look at the Ernst Kirchweger House in Vienna. It's a building linked to a migrant self-organization called the ATIGF, and it has this deep, rich history of anti-fascist resistance and international worker solidarity. A memorial plaque and mural there physically ground our modern labor statistics in a real historical space. It's a powerful reminder that integrating foreign labor isn't just about modern spreadsheets. It actually has deep social roots built on the shared struggles of working-class people across borders. And that historical solidarity really paved the way for modern demographic shifts. You see, without EU migration, Austria's working-age population would have shrunk significantly. Foreign labor objectively mitigated Austria's aging workforce, becoming a total pillar of its economic output. And the data here is super interesting. There's a distinct geographic divide. Nationals from older EU member states usually work in Western Austria in academic or technical roles. Meanwhile, nationals from newer, post-2004 EU member states often work in Eastern Austria, filling vital roles in hospitality, construction, and trade. It just highlights how vital free movement is to keeping everyday industries running across the continent. Next up is Section 4, balancing the EU budget. Time to neutrally unpack the financial realities of Austria's membership. So, as a high-income nation, Austria is a net contributor to the EU budget. They pay in about 0.25% of their gross national income. But where does that money actually go once it hits the central pot? Well, funds flow back into Austria primarily to support rural development and agricultural direct payments. Compared to other member states, Austria receives a relatively high share of funds dedicated specifically to rural development, which ensures that the countryside benefits directly from EU integration. Now, even though Austria remains a strict net contributor on paper, meaning, yes, they pay more into the budget than they get back in direct funding, we really have to look at the bigger picture. That upfront budget cost is completely dwarfed by the massive, almost unquantifiable economic growth generated by participating in the borderless single market. If we only focus on the budget numbers, we completely miss the massive wealth generated by export growth and open trade. Finally, we reach Section 5, Protecting and Expanding Europe. Let's see how Austria balances its reliance on open economic borders with its protective political instincts. Tracking this evolution neutrally reveals what is honestly a fascinating saga. Back in 1995, Austria signed the Schengen Agreement, and by 1998, it officially ended its own border controls, fully embracing free movement. Yet fast forward to its 2018 EU presidency, and its primary focus shifted heavily to security and fighting illegal migration. Remember that motto, "A Europe that protects"? Austria essentially transitioned from dropping its borders to acting as the gatekeeper for newer Eastern European members. And most recently, in late 2024, Austria officially agreed to lift its veto, allowing Romania and Bulgaria to fully enter the Schengen area by 2025. Which brings us to our final, ultimate question. As the European Union continues to expand and face entirely new global pressures, how will Austria balance its protective security instincts with its absolute economic reliance on an open, borderless Europe? How is this historic bridge builder in the heart of Europe going to navigate the future of a rapidly changing continent? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive gave you a crystal clear understanding of Austria's unique role in Europe.